An elegant woman steps into the center of her ex-husband's lavish engagement party, holding hands with two identical boys with the same eyes as him. The room freezes. The sound of her heels on the marble cuts through the silence like a warning. She walks up to the bride, stares coldly at the groom, and says, with a disturbingly calm voice, "These are the children he threw away before they were even born." One sentence. An earthquake. And in the very next moment, the empire of lies he built begins to crumble. What she's about to reveal will end everything. This story is going to hit you hard, but first tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that like button to keep going with us. The silence before a tragedy has something surreal about it. No signs, no alarms, just the breath held in the chest of those who, unknowingly, are about to witness the collapse of a world. Ricardo Almeida smiled confidently at the guests, raising his champagne glass like a polished master of ceremonies. At his side, Sophia beamed in an emerald green dress that looked tailor-made for the moment. Everything had been orchestrated to perfection. The soft classical music, the flashes from the society photographers, the speech filled with eternal love vows and glorious business ambitions. But then, the sound of heels. 3 sharp clicks, a steady stride, a slicing echo across the flawless marble. Every head turned as if pulled by a shared instinct. And there she was. After 7 years, Lorena was back, changed. Her hair was now short, dark, perfectly styled. No trace of the fragile, broken woman who had once been cast out. Nothing in her simple, elegant dress screamed revenge, but the 2 children holding her hands said it all. Ricardo felt the floor vanish beneath him. The world went silent, as if time had stopped. His glass slipped from his fingers and shattered into 1,000 pieces on the floor. His eyes met the boys', hazel green, just like his. "Good evening, Ricardo," Lorena said, her voice as firm as steel. "I believe you recognize those eyes?" Sophia frowned, stepping forward, trying to keep control. "What is going on here?" she asked, her tone more shrill than classy. "Beautiful party. Seems like life really flew by for you," Lorena went on, completely ignoring Sophia. "But there's something you left behind, Ricardo. 2 things, to be exact." Guests began to murmur. Phones were raised, cameras recording from every angle. Julio, the wealthy business partner and best friend, rushed over to try and contain the disaster. "This is madness. Ricardo, tell her to leave. This is trespassing. That woman—" "Shut up, Julio." It was the first thing Ricardo managed to say. His voice came out hoarse, shaky, as if it came from a place long forgotten. He looked at Lorena, not as a man looks at an ex, but like someone facing their own conscience, made flesh, alive, back to demand what was denied. The children stood still. One of them held a blue toy car. The other looked directly at Ricardo with an expression that hurt, as if he knew, as if he'd always been waiting for that moment, without fully understanding why. "Yes," Lorena confirmed without hesitation. "They're your sons, and you erased them from your life before you ever met them." Ricardo's heart pounded like a bomb ready to explode. He felt exposed, naked before the city's elite. His castle of prestige, control, and success was crumbling right there in front of everyone. Click! A camera flash snapped him back. Lorena turned to leave but paused for a moment, glancing at Sophia. "The dress is beautiful. I'm glad you got everything you wanted, or almost everything." Sophia froze. Then Lorena walked away, her sons by her side. The doors closed behind them with the sound of heavy wood, a final snap like a gunshot in the silence, and then chaos. Guests asked who the children were. Reporters turned on cameras. Julio scrambled to do damage control. Sophia bombarded Ricardo with questions like flames, but he was frozen, struggling to breathe. All he could think about was one moment, the day he told Lorena to leave, the day he became the man now falling apart before everyone's eyes. That night changed everything. And the worst was yet to come. 3 hours later, Ricardo was alone in his office. The party had ended before it even began. He ignored dozens of messages, calls from the press, Sophia's desperate shouting. All he wanted was to understand what had happened, or rather, what he had done. He opened a drawer, pulled out an old photo. Him and Lorena laughing on some random beach. Sunlight. Real smiles. It was almost impossible to reconcile that memory with the reality now. A ping from his phone. An anonymous message. "They're your sons. DNA is the next step. Good luck with that." Ricardo let the phone drop to the floor. He stared at the ceiling, closed his eyes. For the first time in years he felt small, ridiculously small, and terrified. Because Lorena hadn't come back for revenge. She came back with the truth, and the truth, unlike revenge, is unstoppable. The next morning came with the smell of fresh bread and ripe fruit. Lorena woke early as usual. She tied her hair into a loose bun and went straight to the kitchen, humming an old tune her mother had taught her as a child. It was one of those days that pretend to be normal, when chaos hides beneath the rug of routine. She was cutting strawberries into small pieces when she heard hurried footsteps upstairs. Strange. Ricardo was never up this early, or in such a rush. Before she could say anything, he appeared at the kitchen door, eyes blazing. "Who is Leandro?" Lorena froze. Knife still in hand, she blinked, confused. "What? Don't pretend, Lorena," he growled. "Who is Leandro? The guy who talks about your scent? Who's counting the days to see you again?" He slammed a stack of papers onto the table with such force that some sheets slid to the floor. Lorena bent down instinctively, picked up one. Screenshots, chat logs, intimate messages, full of desire, direct words, suggestive emojis, exact times. Everything screamed of an affair, of betrayal. She felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. This is a lie. "These screenshots are fake," she whispered, her voice coming out weaker than she wanted. "You know what's worse." Ricardo cut her off, cold and direct. "You're not even trying to hide it. Not even trying to deny it. It disgusts me." Lorena looked up at him, searching his eyes for any flicker of trust, any trace of the love they once shared. But Ricardo had already turned into his own courtroom, judge, jury, and executioner. "Where did you get this? Who gave it to you?" "Julio," he answered, a hint of pride in his tone. "At least he gives a damn." "Julio? You're listening to him? And not to me?" Lorena took a step forward, outraged. "That man has always been jealous of us, always tried to turn you against me. And now, out of nowhere, he brings you these images and you believe them? Seriously? You want me to doubt what I'm seeing with my own eyes? You expect me to believe all this is made up? That these messages just fell from the sky?" "Yes, because that's exactly what happened. These messages are fake, manipulated. I never exchanged a single word with this Leandro, whoever he even is." Ricardo looked away. A small gesture, almost unnoticeable, but fatal. "Matt, don't look away," Lorena whispered, her voice cracking. "Look me in the eye. Tell me you truly believe I'd do this to you, to us." But he stayed silent, the silence of someone who no longer wants to hear, who has already shut the door from the inside. "I want you out of my house." Lorena stepped back, stunned. "What? Are you deaf now, too? Pack your things. Leave. Today. Now. You're kicking me out? I'm freeing you from the lie you've been living in here." She laughed. A dry, bitter laugh. A laugh that already knew the end of the story. "My God, you really believe this, don't you? You want to believe it, because it's easier to hate me than accept you're being manipulated. Enough. I'm tired of your voice." "I'm pregnant," she said, without thinking, as if the words had leapt from her throat into the world. Ricardo froze. "Another lie, of course. I found out yesterday. I wasn't even going to tell you. Not now. Waiting for the perfect moment, huh?" As always, he placed a hand on his chest, trying to steady his heart, though he didn't know why. "Ricardo, please, grab your stuff. I don't want to hear anything else." Lorena looked around. The kitchen, the house, the photos on the walls, vacations, laughter, memories. They were hers too, Once. Now, they weren't anymore. With no choice, she went upstairs, packed a backpack with a few clothes, documents, and her phone. Came down the stairs, her body growing heavier with each step. At the door, she turned one last time. One day you'll remember this, and you'll feel ashamed of yourself. He said nothing, just stood there. The first few hours on the street were a blur. Lorena sat on a park bench, called a college friend, voicemail, tried a former co-worker, nothing. Texted a cousin she still had some contact with, silence. People didn't want to get involved. Everyone knew Ricardo Almeida, respected businessman, well-connected, the image of success. His version of events, that she had cheated and run off with another man, was already spreading like wildfire. Lorena realized she was alone. By late afternoon, she walked into a pharmacy, bought a pregnancy test. The 2 lines appeared almost instantly. She sat in the restroom and cried until her body couldn't take it anymore. With nowhere to go that night, she turned to a church. The priest listened attentively, never interrupting. Then, with a calm voice and eyes full of compassion, he referred her to a social worker. The woman quietly took down her information, fetched some papers, and after a few minutes handed her an address. "It's temporary," she said with a discreet smile, "but it's safe, and most importantly, you won't be alone." The shelter was simple, small, with bunk beds scattered around the room, thin blankets folded at the foot of each bed, and the lingering smell of disinfectant stuck to the walls. The other women watched her with curiosity, some with suspicion, others with tired, empathetic eyes. One offered her a cup of tea, another just silently pointed to an empty bed in the corner. Lorena lay down. The mattress was hard, the pillow barely there, but for the first time in hours, maybe days, she was under a roof, in an enclosed, warm place. Safe. She lifted her hands to her belly. No movement yet, no physical sign of life. But she knew this new existence was real. And then she cried again. But this time, it wasn't despair. It was something else, a kind of pain mixed with something raw and primal. It was a beginning. It was rage. It was strength. It was the first grain of sand in building a new woman. Each morning, the metallic sound of the key turning in the shelter's lock marked the start of a new routine. Women coming and going, worn-out faces, some with bruises poorly masked by cheap makeup, children in their arms, silences that said more than words. Lorena watched everything from the edge of her bed, quiet. She held her belly tightly, as if that was the last thing in the world she could still protect. It was official now. She was pregnant. With twins. She didn't know yet, but her body was already showing signs. Nausea came in waves, unpredictable and overwhelming. Hunger wouldn't let up. Even so, she refused to give in. Something inside her stayed firm, alert, as if it was saying, "Don't give up." She grabbed an old notebook, pages bent at the corners. She started writing everything down, what she ate, what she felt, the pain, the nausea, the thoughts. It was almost scientific, and at the same time, her way of staying sane. In the second week, one of the shelter's volunteers came in with a shy but hopeful announcement. "There's a university nearby hiring for cleaning. It's temporary, pays little, but they offer bus fare and lunch at the campus cafeteria." They didn't ask for experience, just the will to work. He placed the folded flyer in her hand and smiled. In that crumpled piece of paper, Lorena saw a seed, small but alive, and within her a certainty was growing, along with the children she carried. The world could be cruel, but she could be strong too. The next morning, Lorena left early, wearing worn-out jeans, a plain t-shirt, and her hair tied back with a loose elastic. Her eyes had a strange glow, tired but steady. She was ready. When she arrived, she didn't need to explain anything. She was accepted, and the very next day, she started working. Her new world was made of long, silent hallways inside the biosciences building. With broom, mop, bucket and rags, she cleaned classrooms and bathrooms, emptied trash bins full of crumpled papers and the chemical smells of failed experiments. Each room seemed to have a life of its own. Each erased whiteboard held traces of something great, and Lorena wanted to understand. It was there, among mops and spray bottles, that she began to reconnect with the person she once was, the woman who thinks, who dreams, who learns. On quieter afternoons, when the students had already left, Lorena would sometimes sit quietly at the back of a classroom, always with a cleaning rag in her hand, as if she were there by chance. But her eyes, oh, her eyes caught everything: formulas, chemical reactions, complicated words that sounded like magic. One day, while scrubbing the floor of Lab 2B, she overheard 3 students arguing. A dilution error had ruined an important sample. Before she could think, she stepped in. "You reversed the order. You added the acid to the solvent. It was supposed to be the other way around." The 3 students looked at her as if a ghost had spoken. "How do you know that?" one of them asked, still confused. Lorena didn't answer. She just smiled faintly, picked up her bucket, and walked away. 2 days later, the class professor showed up, a man with a white beard, sharp eyes, and a firm yet curious voice. "Lorena, we need to talk." She froze. "I'm sorry if I overstepped. I shouldn't have." "I want to know where you learned that," he interrupted. Somewhat embarrassed, she told him. That she had started studying pharmacy, completed 2 semesters before getting married. That she loved chemistry. That she borrowed books from a community library. That she watched classes in secret, not to snoop but to learn. The professor, his name was Breno, didn't laugh. He didn't judge. He just stood in silence for a moment and then said, "Come by on Mondays and Thursdays at 6 p.m. I'll give you some materials, and if you want to sit in, come through the front door. But let's keep this between us, all right?" She nodded, unable to reply. In that moment, she understood. The world hadn't ended. It had just turned in a different direction. Months passed. Lorena kept up her routine of cleaning, sleepless nights, and secret studying. Slowly, she saved enough to rent a small room in a boarding house. She still went to the shelter for meals and doctor's appointments, but now had a place of her own to sleep. Her belly grew, and the loneliness, well, it was still there, but it didn't hurt the same way. On weekends, she copied class notes into organized notebooks, studied formulas like they were prayers. Breno, increasingly impressed, started testing her knowledge. And she always answered, soft voice but always precise. "You're not a janitor," he said one day. "You're a mind on pause." At 36 weeks pregnant, Lorena was cleaning the whiteboard in the lab when a sharp pain shot through her back. The eraser fell to the floor. She leaned on a desk, gasping. A co-worker rushed over, and together they went to the hospital. The labor was long, painful, exhausting, but safe. 2 boys were born. One crying loudly, as if to shout to the world that he had arrived. The other silent, eyes wide open, staring at his mother as if he already knew everything. Lorena held them, sweat still on her forehead, hair stuck to her skin. And she understood. She didn't need to say a thing. They were there. They were hers. And she would give them what she never had, a dignified beginning. "With you, the story will be different. It'll be worth telling," she whispered. She named the first one Lucas. The second, Caio. Simple names, strong, just like she hoped they'd be. The next morning, while she was breastfeeding, Breno showed up. He brought flowers, diapers, an envelope, and a scholarship. "Clinical Analysis Technician Program. I recommended you. It starts in 2 months. You can do it, Lorena. I know you can." She didn't reply. She just cried. But this time, the tears were full of gratitude. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. She felt alive and rebuilding. Years passed. The woman walking through the hallways of the Federal Research Institute was no longer that frightened girl who used to hide notebooks inside a bucket. Lorena now wore a white lab coat with a researcher's badge pinned to her chest. She was still a single mother, still working double shifts, but the weight on her back was different now. It wasn't desperation, it was purpose. Lucas and Caio were already in daycare at the institute. They knew the way to the reading room and waited for their mother at the end of the day, with drawings in their hands and questions on the tip of their tongues. Lorena taught them that asking questions was the beginning of everything. "Whoever asks questions builds the world," she would say. Mornings began with strong coffee and stale bread, then the lab coat, the clipboard, the laboratory. She was now assistant lead on a project involving biochemical reactions with regenerative compounds, and no one on the team knew more than she did. Lorena's mind worked at a different rhythm. It was like she saw connections no one else could see, subtle links between ideas, hidden paths among data and formulas. Breno, now retired, still visited from time to time. He didn't say much, but his eyes always gave away the quiet pride he felt seeing her there, leading research, citing authors with almost arrogant precision. "You've always had that look, like you understand before you even read," he said once. "You just needed space." It was on an ordinary afternoon, buried in scientific databases, that Lorena came across a familiar name, Almeida Corp. Just another patent filed by a major pharmaceutical company. She almost skipped past it, but something caught her attention. A formula, not just any formula, a near-identical version of one of the first lines of research she and Breno had developed together. The names were different, the terms renamed, but the structure was the same, unmistakable. Lorena felt a chill. It wasn't anger or even surprise. It was something else, a strange feeling, a collision of past and present inside her. This wasn't a coincidence. She knew it. That same night, she began digging, old emails from Breno, forgotten files on USB drives, notebooks filled with sketches, dates, technical notes. Everything matched. The next day, she looked for Breno. "Did you know?" she asked, showing the computer screen with the patent, the registration name, the formula. He read in silence for a long time, until he finally said in a neutral voice, "That formula was stolen. I remember the day we discussed it. The idea of chain modulation was yours. This is yours, Lorena." She didn't cry, didn't yell. She just absorbed it. "Are you going to press charges?" Breno let out a dry laugh. "I'm too old for that fight. But you're a different story." She didn't answer. That night, as she tucked the twins in, Lucas asked, "Mom, do we have a dad?" She hesitated. "Everyone has one, but some dads are far away. Sometimes because they want to be, sometimes because life made it that way." Kaio yawned. "Are ours coming back?" She gave a soft smile. "We already have everything we need. We just haven't realized it yet." They fell asleep, and Lorena stayed there, sitting at the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking. She didn't want revenge. She wanted truth. She wanted ethics. She wanted to build something clean, solid, transparent, something that didn't need to be hidden, masked, or stolen. Months later, Vita Nova Pharmaceutical was born. A grounded dream built in a converted warehouse with a lab, 2 technicians, 1 accountant, and a clear purpose: to create affordable, ethical, and sustainable treatments. No shortcuts, no dirty games. Lorena signed everything, oversaw every step. Her reputation was already opening doors. Her name, though still low profile outside academic circles, was increasingly respected among research professionals. Over time, Vita Nova formed partnerships with public universities, began preclinical testing, and reinvested every cent it earned. The team grew, and Lorena established herself as a leader. She never mentioned Ricardo, never talked about the past, but it was there, in her refusal to take shortcuts, in her obsession with transparency. He was the living reminder of what she never wanted to become. In her first public interview, a reporter asked what her biggest challenge had been. Lorena thought about everything, about being accepted, about proving her worth, about surviving silence. She smiled and answered plainly, being seen. Life bloomed again, and the twins grew alongside it. Inside her, something else began to grow, a desire to bring the truth into the light. Not for revenge, but for balance, for justice. To give the world back what had been distorted. She didn't know how, but she knew that one day Ricardo Almeida would have to face his own ghosts, and this time he would have nowhere to run. One quiet evening at the end of the day, Vita Nova's main lab was nearly silent. The lights dimmed, the soft tapping of keyboards and rustling of papers marked the end of another shift. Lorena was alone in her office, going through old folders Breno had sent her. Letters, formulas, emails from colleagues, until she found an unmarked envelope with a typewritten sheet, practically a relic, but its contents chilled her hands. "Ricardo, as agreed, here are the chat screenshots. I put the edits together just like the old examples. It's enough to bring her down. After that, no more interference. Trust me, Jay." She didn't need a signature. She knew that direct, cold, almost professional style. It was Julio, Ricardo's best friend. The same one who had stood by him the day she was expelled. A chill ran down her spine. What she had suspected for years was now confirmed. The screenshots that had incriminated her had been forged, deliberately, calculated, and Ricardo had believed them. The pain came, but not like a punch, more like a thick fog, a different kind of mourning, not for the loss of someone, but for the certainty that she had once loved someone who chose not to see her. She picked up her phone. "I got a document," she said as soon as Breno answered. "A letter. Julio admits he faked the messages. It's all here, and more. He talks about a deal, about manipulation." "This is a bomb," Breno murmured. "Are you going to use it?" Lorena didn't answer. Not yet. That same week she dove into contracts and records from Almeida Corp, searched through old email backups, and found one that hurt more than all the others. An exchange between Sofia and Julio, weeks before the breakup. "He needs to decide. He's too attached. You know what to do." And below his reply, "It's all set. She goes down this week." Lorena's stomach turned. Worse than she imagined. Julio wanted control of the company. Sofia wanted prestige and access to the money. Together, they set the trap. Ricardo had been manipulated too. That didn't make him innocent, but it placed him on the other side of the board. She opened her laptop, started organizing everything: messages, dates, receipts, patents, corporate ties. The pieces fit with frightening precision. On the outside, Ricardo's success. On the inside, Lorena could see the skeleton of a betrayal. She felt a weight in her chest, something like pity, but it passed quickly. That night, after putting Lucas and Caio to bed, she sat in the kitchen, a cup of forgotten tea, her laptop screen glowing. She typed, "What do you do when the truth can set you free, but also destroy?" Deleted it, typed again, "Silence protects those who suffer." She closed the notebook, stood up, went to the bedroom, looked at her sleeping children, 2 peaceful faces, lost in sleep. And she knew, without a shadow of doubt, it was for them that the truth had to be born. Their lives seemed carefully built. There was peace, there was love, and an apparent immunity to the past. Neither old truths nor buried pain seemed able to break through that, but Lorena knew. She knew that now, truth was no longer a private decision. It was a debt to herself, to her sons, to the name she had built without ever stepping on anyone to get there. The next day, she met with a lawyer specialized in corporate fraud. She brought documents, evidence, everything she had gathered with patience and precision. The man listened silently. "This could become a scandal," he said in the end. "But you'll need something concrete, official, something that ties all the points together." Lorena simply nodded. She knew exactly where to look. The Almeida Corp headquarters was still the same. Elegant, cold, with receptionists wearing headsets like they were guarding state secrets. She didn't go in, stayed across the street, observing. She had one name in her mind and a purpose in her heart: Julio. He was still there, behind the scenes, no official title, but plenty of power. A ghost with the title of advisor. She didn't want revenge. She wanted accountability, and Julio owed the truth. Back at the lab, she typed a new name into Vita Nova's project system. It wasn't revenge. It was correction, and it was just beginning. The video of Lorena's appearance at Ricardo's engagement party blew up on social media. In less than 24 hours, it had over 5 million views. Cell phone cameras captured everything. The silence, the glass breaking, the sharp phrase, "I think you recognize these eyes." The press wasted no time connecting the dots. Lorena Nunes, Ricardo Almeida's long-lost ex-wife, founder of the promising Vita Nova, and two boys, twins, identical to their biological father. The questions came like an avalanche. Did Ricardo know about the pregnancy? Why was Lorena resurfacing now? What was Sofia Gallardo's role? The fiancée. Ricardo locked himself in his house for 2 days, ignored calls, muted the marketing team, avoided mirrors. He watched the videos dozens of times, looking for editing, a loophole, a denial. There wasn't one. The boy's eyes didn't lie. On the morning of the 3rd day, he opened the door with messy hair and a wrinkled shirt. A court officer handed him an envelope. Inside, a formal request for a DNA test. No note, no handwritten word. Just the protocol. Direct, cold, just like her. Ricardo held the paper with trembling hands. His throat tightened. That sheet didn't just confirm paternity. It confirmed he had left it all behind, that he chose not to see. Across town, Lorena avoided cameras. With support from her colleagues at Vita Nova, she released a simple statement. Lorena Nunes will not comment on personal matters. Her focus remains on scientific innovation. The response only fueled public curiosity. Articles, podcasts, columns. Everyone wanted the woman who silenced the elite with dignity. Justice for Lorena and Eyes Don't Lie trended worldwide. 3 days later, Ricardo took the test. The result? 99.9% genetic match. They were his sons. He collapsed onto his bathroom floor. Cried, forehead pressed against the cold tile. Cried not just for being deceived, but for having believed it, for being weak, mostly for not being there, at the birth, the first step, the first fever, the first words. He had missed everything. In the news, his image made headlines, from visionary to absent, the fall of Ricardo Almeida. Meanwhile, Lorena declined TV invitations. She took Lucas and Caio to school, packed their lunches, reviewed research. "Are you just going to ignore all this?" her advisor asked one morning. "I have nothing left to prove," she replied. "I know who I am." The following week, Ricardo tried returning to routine. The shareholders demanded answers. His absence as a father became a metaphor for his absence as a CEO. In a meeting, Julio spoke up. "We need a new image. This isn't personal anymore. It's about trust." Ricardo looked at him, and for the first time, he saw beyond the strategic facade. He saw the manipulator, and he understood this wasn't about saving the company. It was about not losing himself. By the end of the month, Ricardo's collapse became an editorial. The Persona magazine cover story read, "Lorena's quiet dignity and Ricardo Almeida's noisy fall." Society had chosen its heroes, and this time he wasn't one of them. But maybe there was still time. At least he wanted to believe there was. Late in the afternoon, Ricardo stood in front of Lorena's house. A modest home on a quiet street, hands in his pockets, shoulders heavy. When the gate opened, Lorena appeared. She didn't look surprised. She'd been expecting him. "What do you want?" she asked. Not cold, but not welcoming either. "To talk to them. That's all." She hesitated. "They don't know you, and they don't owe you anything." "I know. That's why I want to take it slow, if that's possible." Lorena weighed each of his words, took a deep breath, then opened the gate a little more. 15 minutes in the yard. If they get uncomfortable, I'll end it." He nodded. The yard was simple. Hanging planters, toys scattered around, a rope swing tied to a tree. On the concrete floor, colorful chalk drawings, names, numbers, crooked drawings of houses and people. "Lucas, Caio," she called. The two came running, hair messy, knees dirty from playing outside. Ricardo looked at them, and for the first time saw everything he'd lost. And maybe, just maybe, something he could still recover. They stopped when they saw Ricardo. The look on their faces held a mix of shock and uncertainty, like they were staring at a character they'd only heard about in half-told stories, as if this man had stepped out of an unfinished chapter full of gaps. "This is Ricardo," Lorena said, crouching beside them. "He's your father." Lucas instinctively gripped his mother's arm. Caio took a step back. Ricardo knelt, trying to bridge the distance. "Hi," he tried to say, but his voice cracked. He took a breath, forced a smile, and began again. "I know it's strange seeing me here, that you don't know me, but I know you. I think about you every day since—" He stopped. No sentence seemed enough. No word could fill the absence. "Do we have a dad?" Lucas asked, with a seriousness far beyond his age. "You always have," Lorena replied firmly. Not angry, but with a truth that cut deep. Caio stepped closer, like he was examining a puzzle piece he'd never been able to fit. "Do you have toys?" Ricardo let out a breath, nearly laughed. "Not today, but I can bring some. If you'd like, I'll bring them next time." Lucas looked at his brother, then at their mother. "Can he see the drawing?" "What drawing?" Ricardo asked. Lorena hesitated, then got up and went inside. She returned with a folded piece of poster board, handed it to her son, who ran to Ricardo. The drawing was simple, made with colored pencils. 3 figures holding hands, Lorena in the center, wearing pink, Lucas on one side, Caio on the other. Above them, a yellow sun and 2 red hearts. To the right, separated from the rest, was a small stick figure with a question mark above his head. Ricardo held the paper for a few seconds. He said nothing. He just carefully folded the drawing as if it were too fragile to touch, and placed it on his lap. "Who's this one?" he asked, pointing. "Mom said that's our dad," Caio replied seriously, "but he was far away." Ricardo nodded, swallowing hard. But now I want to be close." "Are you going away again?" Lucas asked. There was no bitterness in the question, but it hit Ricardo like an arrow to the chest. "Only if you want me to." The boys looked at each other. Caio was the first to sit on the grass. Lucas joined him soon after. They began playing with a makeshift racetrack made of wooden pieces. Ricardo watched silently, like someone seeing a movie he had always wanted to be a part of. He pulled a small metal airplane keychain from his pocket. "I had 2. One was mine. I thought maybe this one could be yours." He offered it. Caio took it and spun it in his hands. He pressed a small button. The wings opened. "That's so cool," Lucas said with a shy smile. Lorena watched from a distance. She didn't smile, but she didn't stop it either. 15 minutes passed like a breath. "Boys, time to come in," she said. "But he just got here," Caio protested. Lorena stood firm. Ricardo got to his feet, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Can I come back tomorrow?" She hesitated. "Maybe, but don't make promises. They've had enough of those." He nodded. Before leaving, he looked once more at the drawing still in his hands. That piece of poster board said more than 1,000 headlines. It showed, with the cruelty of a child's simplicity, the space he had left empty. That night, Ricardo stayed in his car for nearly an hour, the drawing on the seat beside him. The streetlight cast shadows over the tiny figure with the question mark above its head. That was when he understood. Rebuilding doesn't start with grand words. It starts with presence, with time, with humility, and if he were lucky, with forgiveness. The black folder sat on the table like a silent bomb. Lorena, arms crossed, watched Julio leaf through the papers with the cold detachment of someone who still believed he was in control. They were in a private room in a discreet hotel, far from the press, far from Ricardo. Julio finished reading, set the documents down, and smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's impressive what you can do with screenshots, dates, old records," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But it's also impressive how everything can be reinterpreted, manipulated, depends on the lens." Lorena didn't respond. She just discreetly turned on the recorder hidden in the pen on the table. A barely audible click. Julio didn't notice. "You know what I think, Lorena?" he continued, pouring himself a glass of water. "You have a good story, moving, The public loves it. Warrior mom, wronged woman, but you're playing with big stuff, and that comes with a price. She looked at him with calm. Is that a threat? It's a proposal. Julio slid a smaller folder across the table. A confidentiality agreement and a six-figure offer. You stay quiet. We wrap this up as a misunderstanding from the past. You get funding to expand your pharmaceutical startup. Everyone moves on peacefully. Lorena glanced at the contract for 2 seconds before pushing it away. She didn't even touch it. Your problem is thinking everyone has a price. And yours is thinking the world runs on integrity. The door burst open. Sophia walked in, heels hitting the floor with restrained fury. So it's true. You're trying to buy her silence with a pathetic check, Julio. It's not a threat, he tried to explain. But it is, she snapped, firm. Her expression changed. She threw another folder on the table, heavier, fuller. You want to know what I brought? A dossier, photos, messages, videos? Want to test who's got the moral high ground? I can ruin your image in minutes. Your warrior becomes an opportunist. And you, a bitter ex. Lorena leaned back calmly. That sounds like an official threat. Sophia smiled. It's just a preview. If you keep up this hero act, there's going to be a show. Silence fell over the room for a moment. Unhurried, Lorena opened her purse and took out her phone. What a pitiful scene, she muttered almost sarcastically. But you know, this is going to make excellent content. She turned the screen toward them. The entire recording was there, from the veiled bribe to the overt threat of public exposure. Julio's face drained of color, his complexion fading like ink in water. You recorded this? Of course. It was too predictable not to. This is illegal. Only if no one here consented, she replied, pointing at herself, steady. And before either of you thinks about reacting, the audio's already in the cloud, time-stamped, geolocated, and more. There are backup copies. Sophia paled. Tried to keep her composure. You're bluffing. Want to find out? She stood, grabbed the black folder and shoved it against Julio's chest with just enough force to make it clear. I didn't come here to negotiate. I came to warn you. The next time you hear my name, it'll be from the stage of an international conference. I won't need to name names. I'll just show the data. The market will understand, and it will know how to interpret. Julio stood, his eyes burning with frustration. You're going to ruin everything. I'm just going to clean out what was rotten from the start. She left the room. Each step in the hallway echoed like the snap of a decision she wouldn't take back. Outside, the sky was heavy and grey. It wasn't raining, but the air was dense, as if something important was about to unfold. Clutched to her chest, Lorena held the recorder tightly, as if it were a shield. She walked slowly but without hesitation. For the first time in a long time, she was the one in control. Already in the car, she activated the speakerphone on her phone. Brano! It worked. He fell for it, just like we expected. It's all recorded, and I've already sent it to the lawyer. Now we begin the next phase. On the other end, her mentor chuckled, not out of joy, but with the kind of pride that understands the power of strategic silence. I never doubted you. Lorena smiled too, though with a calm bitterness. This isn't revenge, Brano. It's setting things right. They spent a lifetime saying silence means consent. Well, now I'm speaking. That night, when she got home, she found Lucas with a blue pencil in his mouth and Caio lying on the floor, drawing a colorful rocket. Mom, can I use glitter for my project? Only if you promise to clean everything up after, she replied, taking off her earrings and releasing her shoulders from the weight of the day. They nodded. Lorena watched them for a moment, her heart pulsing between sweetness and contained fury. She knew exactly how big a fight she was entering, but this time she was the one setting the rules. And the game had only just begun. The International Congress on Pharmaceutical Innovation, held in Lisbon, was one of the most important events in the industry. It brought together renowned scientists, multinational CEOs, university representatives, sharp-eyed investors, and curious minds from around the world. In the main auditorium, which could seat nearly 1,000 people, every spot had been reserved days in advance. all because of a lecture no one had originally expected, but now everyone wanted to see. Scientific Ethics as a Corporate Pillar, presented by Lorena Nunes, CEO of the rising pharmaceutical company Vita Nova. Her name had been known for months, not just in academic circles, but in gossip sites, social media debates, and online forums. But here, in front of that audience, she wasn't the woman from the scandal. She was the researcher, the founder, the mind behind a new era. Backstage, Lorena was ready. She wore a flawless grey blazer, her hair in a neat bun, and minimal makeup, no papers in hand. She had memorized every word of her speech, not out of vanity, but because every sentence had a purpose. As she crossed paths with the event coordinator, he asked if she wanted water. She simply replied, "Focus." Outside, the crowd buzzed with tension and curiosity. Journalists, students, competitors. Some expected a technical talk, others a dramatic confession. No one was ready for what they were about to hear. "Good afternoon." Lorena's voice echoed smoothly and clearly, amplified by the mic clipped to her collar. Behind her, the screen displayed only her name and her company's logo. "I'm here today to talk about something that rarely takes center stage at events like this: scientific integrity." She paused, walked calmly across the stage. "All of us here know the cost of developing a new drug, the pressure for results, the race to market, the patent wars, time, money, expectations. But hardly anyone talks about what's lost when we give up something invisible: trust." She looked directly at the audience. Faces met her gaze. Still no images on the screen. 5 years ago, a research line in cellular regeneration was abruptly shut down at a Brazilian university. The reasons? Lack of funding, shift in priorities, no support. Months later, an almost identical formula appeared, registered by an industry giant. No credit to the scientists, no documentation, no legitimate traceability. Lorena stopped at the center of the stage. Science is not ownership, it's legacy. And when innovation becomes appropriation, when silence from the invisible becomes profit, the industry begins to rot from the inside. The screen lit up with charts, diagrams, and data. A clear thread connected the original research to the patent filing. It showed diversion of intellectual property, offshore entities, dubious validations funded by shadowy interests. No names were mentioned, but anyone familiar with the behind-the-scenes understood everything. In a corporate building in Brazil, at the Almeida Corp headquarters, Ricardo watched the live stream alone, feet on the cold floor, his face lit by the screen. In that silence, he understood. There was no turning back. Lorena wasn't just speaking. She was revealing. She was moving pieces. She was changing everything. Lorena spoke with calm. No insults, no anger, no need to raise her voice. Her posture was firm, her gaze steady. And the most striking thing, she didn't have to attack anyone for the truth to come out. Her words cut like blades because they carried not just the flaws of a corporation, but the moral choices, or lack thereof, that allowed it all to happen. Sophia, who always had a comeback, now wasn't even answering her phone. Julio had simply vanished from the company premises. Ricardo, for his part, understood. What was crumbling wasn't the company. It was the lie that upheld it. At the Congress, Lorena closed with strength. "We no longer live in a time where silence brings victory. Today, innovation must be clean, documented, traceable. Otherwise, it's just another shadow in disguise. I'm not here to accuse. I'm here to propose that we do better, so that one day we can look our children in the eye and say, we left behind a fairer world." She ended with a simple gesture. The audience remained silent for a few seconds. Then came the applause. At first hesitant, then intense, almost urgent, journalists rushed to publish the first headlines. Lorena Nunes silences giants with historic lecture on scientific ethics. Truth, when silence destroys and clarity saves. Without naming names, Lorena exposes the industry's rotten core. In the days that followed, the fallout was like a slow-acting poison. Julio was officially removed from his informal advisory role at Almeida Corp. Internal investigations began probing his ties to shell companies linked to the patent registrations. Sophia, pressured by the revelations and her hidden past, was removed from the Executive Council for misconduct and conflict of interest. Ricardo, under pressure from shareholders and public opinion, announced a temporary leave from the presidency. He gave no interviews, offered no defense. He simply stepped away. The stock market wavered for a few days, then stabilized. The market understood. The era of silence was over. Lorena declined interviews. She went home, had chamomile tea with her kids, answered emails from her team. A week later, she found a plain envelope on her desk. Inside, a handwritten letter, no signature. It simply read, "When the truth is told with elegance, the silence of the guilty is the loudest applause." She read it, folded the paper, and placed it in a drawer next to her first college notebook, the one where, hidden on the cold lab floor, she used to scribble down ideas and formulas. She ran her fingers over the worn cover and smiled. She didn't need to win anymore. She already had. That's when the fever started. Chills, a slight discomfort after a bath. Lorena noticed it first in Caio's eyes. They looked different, glazed, dim, as if his spirit had withdrawn. He who was always the most energetic seemed off, too quiet, too warm. She took him straight to the emergency room at São Lucas Children's Hospital. The fever reached 102 degrees. Initial tests pointed to a viral infection, but something about his heartbeat, something in his immune pattern, concerned the medical team. They decided to admit him. Lucas stayed with a neighbor. Lorena stayed with Caio. Sitting beside his bed, she held her son's small hands. He whispered in a weak voice, "Mommy, you're never going to leave, right?" She kissed his damp forehead and replied with a broken smile. In the afternoon, the doctors returned with news. They needed to draw more blood. A transfusion might be necessary, and Caio's blood type was rare. O negative. Lorena wasn't a match. They needed to find the father. Ricardo answered the phone mid-afternoon. He was at home reading reports, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. When he heard Lorena's voice, the ground seemed to vanish beneath him. "It's Caio. He's in the hospital. We need blood. I'm not a match." "Which hospital?" "São Lucas. I'm on my way." He didn't hesitate. No questions. Less than an hour later, he was there. The smell of disinfectant, the tense silence, the sterile glare of fluorescent lights. He walked straight past reception, said Lorena's name. A security guard escorted him to the second floor. She was standing in the hallway, arms crossed. Tired eyes, but steady. "He's in the room. The doctors will run a compatibility test." "I already know I'm a match," Ricardo said, cutting her off. "Just show me the way." The blood was drawn quickly. 2 hours later, the confirmation. "Sir, you are a match. We can proceed." Ricardo didn't hesitate. He donated in silence, without drama. Then he sat beside the bed. Caio was asleep, but breathing easier. The medication was starting to work. Lorena didn't say much, but she didn't leave either. She stayed. The next morning, Caio woke up, still weak but alert. "Hi," he whispered, slowly opening his eyes. Ricardo sat beside him, holding a blue-covered children's book. "Hey, champ," he answered, voice thick with emotion. Caio looked around, taking in the room. His eyes settled on Ricardo's face. "Was it you? Who helped me?" "It was. I gave you a bit of my blood. Nothing too big." Caio smiled tiredly. "Mum said that's something dads do." Something broke inside Ricardo. It wasn't pain. It was relief, like a dam bursting and everything he'd held in for years escaping through the warmth in his eyes. I'm your dad," he said almost in a whisper. Caio reached out and touched his chin. "Then it's okay. It's that simple." And Ricardo cried, for the first time truly. No hiding. Head bowed, clutching that small hand like someone holding onto a second chance at redemption. Lorena watched from the doorway. She said nothing. But in her eyes, always firm, always guarded, there was, finally, softness. The next day, Lucas came to visit his brother. Caio, now sitting up, announced proudly, "Our dad came. He gave me blood, just like in the movies." Lucas looked at Ricardo, curious. He stepped away from his mom and walked over. "Is it true? You're our dad?" "I am," Ricardo answered more confidently now. "And I want to be, if you'll let me." Lucas was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled a toy from his pocket. "This one's my favorite. No one's allowed to touch it. But you can hold it for a bit." Ricardo took the toy carefully, as if it were sacred, as if, in that small gesture, forgiveness lived. In the days that followed, he came back often, brought a book, a little game, or simply time. He read to the boys, asked questions, listened, laughed with them. He didn't try to force a bond, didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He just was there, and for the first time, that was enough. By that time of day, the hospital had quieted down, and inside that room, something like a new beginning was starting to breathe. Caio slept deeply, his little face calm and peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of the previous hours. The fever had subsided, and the doctors finally seemed relieved. The treatment was taking effect, and the worst, it seemed, was behind them. Lucas, exhausted, drifted off on a makeshift couch, clutching a rocket-printed pillow. Lorena remained by the bed, sitting in silence, eyes fixed on her sleeping son, though her mind was far away. Her body ached, from exhaustion, from tension, from years of swallowing the world in silence. Everything throbbed inside, a constant echo that never seemed to fade. Ricardo approached quietly, carrying a glass of water. "Brought this for you." She accepted it with a small nod, whispered a thank you, and silence returned to fill the room. For a few seconds, the only sound was Caio's heart monitor, steady and comforting. "He's going to be okay," Ricardo said, trying to break the silence. "I know," Lorena replied. "He's strong." The silence returned, heavy, almost tangible. Ricardo shifted in his chair, looked at the boys, then at Lorena. "Can I talk to you?" His voice came out low, tense, controlled. Lorena took a deep breath before nodding. "I know that no words of mine can erase what happened, but still, I need to say them." She didn't interrupt him. "I wasn't man enough to listen to you. That eats me up every day. The way things ended, the way you left that house, I replay that moment in my head all the time, and every time it hurts more thinking about what I should have done differently." She stayed quiet, eyes fixed on Caio. She let him go on. "I believed what they told me, because it was easier, because I was proud, blind, weak, and it cost everything." He stood up slowly, walked over to the window, arms crossed as if trying to hold his world together. "Do you remember that day?" "I do," she said, almost in a whisper. "I walked down the stairs with just a backpack, a change of clothes, my documents, my phone. I was scared. Scared of not knowing where to go, scared of losing the baby, not even knowing there were two." She closed her eyes, and the memories came flooding back. The wet sidewalk, reflecting the cold light of the street lamps. The biting wind on her face, her thin coat useless, the phone in her hand trembling, not just from the cold, but from fear. She called, again and again, straight to voicemail. Tried friends, distant relatives, nothing. She sat on a bench in the park, curled up, stomach aching. Her body had already started giving signs, even before the test confirmed it. An old lady passed by and gave her that classic look, part pity, part judgment. Lorena lowered her gaze. The sting of wounded pride hurt more than the hunger, more than the cold. She opened her eyes. Back to the present. It wasn't pain anymore, just memory, but it still pulsed. "I spent days eating whatever I could find, slept in a church, threw up alone in a public restroom when I found out I was pregnant. My first reaction, fear, then anger, at myself, at you, for trusting so much, for loving so much someone who turned their back the moment I needed them most." Ricardo didn't say a word. He just listened, eyes brimming. I felt the ground disappear under me, and I swore I'd never depend on anyone again. She turned slowly to face him. "You asked if you could ask for forgiveness." Pause. "You can, but don't expect to hear what you want, because what breaks like that doesn't get fixed with words alone. Ricardo lowered his head. His chest tightened. I know I'm not here for you to take me back, or to wash away my guilt with a, it's okay. And I just wanted you to know, I'm trying to be different for them, and if possible, for me too. Lorena returned to the couch, ran a hand through her hair, and took a deep breath. The boys see you. They're starting to trust you. That's already a lot. Maybe that's enough, but I won't forget, and I won't pretend it's over. I don't want to forget either, he said, firmer now. I want to remember every single day, so I never repeat it again. Later, once the boys were asleep, Ricardo said goodnight. Good night, Lorena. She only nodded. Before leaving, he pulled something from his pocket. Caio's drawing, the one with a figure outside the family circle, marked with a question mark. Ricardo drew a line connecting that figure to the others. He didn't erase anything, he just connected them. Below it, he wrote, I'm here, whenever you're ready. He left the paper on the nightstand by the bed and left. No promises, no pressure, just presence. The next morning, before the sun was even up, Ricardo parked in front of Lorena's house. Routine was starting to take shape, and he felt the weight of it. But it was a different kind of weight. He was there for a simple reason, to make his kids breakfast. No driver, no staff, just him. In the back seat, a bag with fresh bread, orange juice he squeezed himself, and a checklist of notes he'd made after watching a video called How to Make a Healthy Breakfast for Kids. He spent the night trying to memorize everything. In the small, tidy kitchen, everything was meticulously organized, like everything Lorena did. It intimidated him a bit. He washed his hands, laid out the ingredients, and got started. Toasted the bread, warmed the milk, cut the fruit. Carefully. Everything was going fine, until he forgot the blender lid. Orange juice on the walls, on the ceiling, on the cupboard, on his apron. Perfect, he muttered, trying to maintain dignity as he cleaned up. He heard footsteps. Lucas appeared in the doorway, hair messy, eyes half closed. Is this noise morning magic? It is. I'm trying to make breakfast. Where's Mom? She had an early meeting. I asked if I could handle things today. Lucas rubbed his eyes and went to sit down. Caio arrived soon after, dragging a doll across the floor. What's that smell? Probably the toast that I may have overdone. Even so, they ate. They laughed, gave superhero names to the fruits, Speedy Banana, Powerful Strawberry, the Unbeatable Grape Squad. They even had an impromptu napkin war. It wasn't a perfect breakfast, but it was theirs. It was real, and for the first time, that was enough. Ricardo looked at his kids with a mix of pride and surprise in his eyes. Who would have thought such simple acts could mean so much? It was just breakfast, brushing teeth, laughter echoing through the house. But to him, it was enormous. Lorena arrived before 8. She found the boys in the bathroom, lively, brushing their teeth with enthusiasm. The juice still stained the kitchen wall, a citrus reminder of the chaotic morning. The wall survived? She asked, crossing her arms with a subtle smile. The wall maybe not, but I think the morning did. She didn't answer. She just stepped in and looked around. Used plates, empty glasses, smiling kids. They were happy, and so was he. In the days that followed, Ricardo found a way to be present, without intruding, without demanding, just by offering. He started picking the boys up from school twice a week, helped with homework, read bedtime stories. He discovered Lucas hated pens, that stopped working halfway through writing a G, and that Caio was the king of lists. He made lists for everything, favorite cartoons, animals he wanted to see up close, fruits he was willing to eat. At the first parent-teacher meeting, Ricardo sat among suited-up mums and dads, more focused on their phones than on what the teacher was saying. But he was there, attentive, taking in every word. When she showed a drawing made by Lucas, a house with 4 people holding hands, Ricardo held his breath. He was there, in the picture, no longer a question mark, but a presence. In the 3rd week, Lorena got stuck at a work conference and asked Ricardo to take the boys to their school poetry recital. Caio stepped onto the stage and recited a poem about an invisible superhero who always protected the home. And at the end, He looked straight at his father. "Is that Hero?" "Me?" Ricardo asked afterward. Caio grew serious. "Not yet, but you're training well." Routine came with its failures too. Ricardo once forgot the swimming bag. Another time, he mixed up the tutoring schedule and arrived late. He struggled to understand the homework. The method was totally different. "This isn't your time anymore, Dad," Lucas said, rolling his eyes. But even making mistakes, he was there. And that changed everything. On a random afternoon, Ricardo decided to make pancakes. They turned out uneven, poorly shaped, but full of effort. When Lorena came home early, she stood at the kitchen door. She looked at the splattered batter. Too much sugar, too much cocoa. He looked like a clumsy alchemist. Ricardo tried to keep his composure. Lorena leaned against the doorframe. She didn't say anything, but there was a brightness in her eyes that hadn't been there in a long time. Later, she called Ricardo in for a talk. "They're getting attached, and so am I." She spoke softly, staring into nothing. "They trust quickly. But if you disappear, if you screw up badly, it's going to hurt them more than anything you've ever gone through." Ricardo nodded. "I'm not going to disappear. And yes, I'll mess up. But not like before. Now, I stay." Lorena stared at him for a long moment. "For now, you're doing okay." That night, Ricardo read a story to both boys. They were in pajamas, sharing the same blanket. When the story ended, Caio pulled the blanket up to his chin and asked, "Dad, tomorrow can you take us to play in the yard after school? And make pancakes too," Lucas added. "The wonky, yummy ones." "You got it," Ricardo replied. "It's a deal," they both said, almost in unison. He stayed there watching until they fell asleep. Then he turned off the light, closed the door carefully, and stood in the hallway for a moment. He took a deep breath. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone anymore. It was about being there, living one day at a time, present. The building was old, worn down, with greenish glass windows and a metal staircase that creaked with every step. Ricardo climbed slowly but steadily. He knew he was about to face a ghost, or maybe a broken reflection of himself. His name was Julio. The address, sent anonymously, said it all. After Lorena's conference, Sophia's public downfall, the exposure, Julio was alone and sinking. Upon entering, Ricardo smelled mold, old paper, and neglect. The place was cramped, poorly lit. On the small table there were food scraps, scattered papers, and an old computer that barely worked. Julio was there. Wrinkled t-shirt, deep eye bags, body slumped in the chair. "Knew you'd probably come even if it took a while," he said hoarsely, like someone who no longer expected anything. Ricardo didn't answer right away. He just stared at him. In that dark room, both men knew. It was time to face the past. No excuses. Ricardo said nothing. He simply pulled out a chair and sat in front of him. Julio. The air was thick with tension. Then Ricardo spoke. Direct, with no detours, the way he'd always wanted to. Julio gave a crooked, almost mocking smile. "All right, let's go. You want to know why I did it? Why I made up those messages? Why I planted doubt, fed your anger?" Ricardo kept his eyes locked on him. Didn't flinch. "Yes, I want to know." "Because I could," Julio said flatly. "Because you let me. Because you were always the brightest, the most loved, the most respected, and at the same time, absurdly naive." He laughed, but it was bitter. "You had everything in your hands, Ricardo, and you acted like you didn't need to protect any of it. You were weak. I just showed you how cruel silence can be." Ricardo murmured, voice low and wounded. "You destroyed a family. You kicked her out of her own life with lies. You stole our years, years we can't get back." "Me?" Julio shot back, laughing louder this time. "No, Ricardo. I just set the board. You made the final move. I only pushed the right buttons. And you were always just a button waiting to be pushed." Ricardo felt the hit, but it wasn't rage. It was disgust. At himself. "And was it worth it?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Julio didn't hesitate. "It was. I had power, status, and the pleasure of watching the man everyone adored fall." But then he looked around, the dark room, the mold on the walls, the emptiness, and added, "And now, I'm just a memory of a game I lost in the end. You still have a chance to do something with what's left. Ricardo stood up. His chest felt like it carried concrete inside. You'll pay for this. I already am, Julio replied, his look a mix of exhaustion and defeat. The difference is, you still have a choice. I don't. On the way back, Ricardo drove in silence. The streets blurred past the window. Julio's words still echoed like blades slicing from the inside. You were weak. And it was true. Weak with Lorena, weak with the truth, weak with his sons. But there was still one thing he could do. That night, he went to Lorena's house. She was in the living room. The boys were on the floor, working on a puzzle. He waited for the right moment. Then he stepped closer, his voice quiet but steady. Can we talk? Lorena saw the weight on his face. She nodded. They went to the backyard. The sky was clear, the night cool. They stayed silent for a few moments until Ricardo spoke. I saw Julio. Her eyes widened, but she said nothing. He confirmed everything. The lies, the plan, the envy, and he told me something worse. That I was easy to manipulate because I was weak, and he was right. Lorena crossed her arms, as if trying to shield herself. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve to hear the whole truth. Because it's not fair for you to carry a weight alone that others helped create. And because even if I can't erase anything, I can acknowledge everything. She took a deep breath. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. I spent years rebuilding my self-esteem, piece by piece, Ricardo. I did it scrubbing floors, studying in secret, getting cramps from carrying the boys alone to the hospital, afraid I wouldn't have money for a cab back home. And even so, she continued looking at him, the whole time, I still loved you, even while trying not to. The words hung in the air. They cut the silence like a blade. I never stopped loving you, Lorena, he replied, stepping closer. That doesn't erase what you did, she whispered, but it changes what I can do now. Their eyes met. There was no script in that moment. Ricardo touched her face gently. She didn't pull away. The kiss happened, deep, quiet, like someone searching for home in the other's body, but seconds later she pulled back, still with her eyes closed, breathing deeply. It's not the right time yet. He nodded. No resentment. I'll wait, as long as it takes. Lorena walked to the door. Before going in, she turned and said, What we have now is the gift of our children, and that's already a lot. Ricardo stayed in the yard, looking at the dark sky. There were no stars, but there was a strange kind of peace, because he understood in that moment that rebuilding doesn't come from instant forgiveness. It comes from presence, from respect, from waiting, and he was willing. The offer arrived on a grey morning. No big announcement, no fuss. A direct email, signed by one of Europe's top applied research universities, International Genetic Development Project. We seek ethical leadership, strategic vision, and a proven impact record. 2-year contract. Based in Stockholm, Lorena read it 3 times, closed the laptop, took a deep breath. It was the kind of opportunity that would have seemed impossible years ago. But now, there it was, written, clear, on a white screen. With one decision, she could change everything, gain recognition, comfort, and distance. That night, after the kids were asleep, she went out to the balcony. The wind was cold. She curled up in her sweatshirt, holding a cup of tea, and there she stayed, thinking. Because sometimes the future comes disguised as a chance, and the heart needs silence to decide if it wants to leave or stay. Ricardo showed up unannounced. By now, it was almost routine for him to stop by after work, help with the kids' homework, read a bedtime story. He wasn't just a guest anymore. He was part of the routine, a presence that fit. But that night, something in Lorena's face was different. Is everything okay? He asked gently. She nodded slowly, then spoke all at once. An offer came from Stockholm. 2 years leading an international biogenetics project. They're looking for someone ethical, someone who represents the future. She paused. It wasn't just an offer. It was a crossroads. It's an honor, and also an escape, she said, looking straight at Ricardo. I read that email and felt proud, but also afraid. Afraid to give up something that, for the first time in a long time, doesn't suffocate me. Afraid to take the boys away from their father. From you. She looked him in the eyes. And you? Would you go? Ricardo took his time to answer. He thought, weighed. I don't know, was all he said. The next day, while tidying up the kitchen, Lorena found a handmade envelope at the bottom of Caio's backpack. Inside, a colorful drawing, scribbled with crayons, a giant heart, 2 stick figures holding hands, and a crooked sentence written with effort. Mom, plus Dad, plus me, plus Lucas, dressing family. Don't go far. Stay here with us. Lorena sat at the table holding the drawing. She stayed there in silence for minutes, unable to let go of the paper. Later that evening, she called Ricardo. The boys were with a neighbor. They sat on the living room couch. She took a deep breath before beginning. It's a big opportunity, growth, visibility, but it's also leaving, starting over from scratch. And honestly, I don't want that anymore. Ricardo listened without interrupting. I used to think running away was a sign of strength, she continued. Now I see that staying can be too. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened with the truth of her words. Do you want me to ask you to stay? He asked, not sarcastic, just the sincere pain of someone who wants to but won't manipulate. I don't want you to ask me for anything. I just want you to understand, if I decide not to go, and support me, if I choose to stay. Ricardo nodded. I understand, and I support you. Whether you stay or go, I'm here. She looked him in the eyes, and then said, her voice coming out like a whisper, I'm staying. That sentence wasn't a burden. It was relief, a choice made with calm, with clarity, for the kids, for herself. They need stability. From you, from me, from us. Ricardo looked at her carefully. From us? Really? She smiled, just a little, from the corner of her mouth. I don't know yet, but I want to discover a new path, without labels, without rush, just with presence. That's what I can offer you right now. I want you at school, during the fevers, for the achievements, on the ordinary days. And I'll be there, he replied. But now, not as someone who commands, as someone who shares. That night, after dinner, Ricardo stayed a bit longer. The boys made up a question game. At one point, Caio looked at the 2 adults and asked, Are you 2 going to live together? Lorena laughed. Not yet, my love. But we're building a different kind of home, one that starts here, she said, touching her chest. In the heart. Lucas added, But will there be pancakes? Ricardo laughed out loud. There will be pancakes, yes. And trips to the park? Asked Caio. There will be everything we build together, Lorena answered, looking first at the boys, then at Ricardo. Later, with everyone asleep, Lorena looked again at the email with the proposal. She didn't delete it. She didn't reply either. She moved it to a folder called Possibilities, because now something more urgent needed to be built, and it was right there in the next room, under a blanket with paper star prints. The table was small, covered with a plastic tablecloth full of rockets and planets. In the center, a chocolate cake with dripping frosting and 2 number 6 candles. Colorful balloons taped to the walls, cups with dinosaur drawings, a speaker playing kids' songs. It was the first time Lucas and Caio celebrated a birthday with their dad present. And for Ricardo, it was also the first time a birthday meant more than work speeches or hollow toasts. There he was, in a simple t-shirt, kneeling on the floor, helping Caio build the cardboard castle they had made together days before. Lorena, in the kitchen, prepared fresh juice, sliced fruit, and laughed at Lucas's theories about what a dinosaur-hosted party would be like. There would be meat everywhere, the boy said, excited, and no one would wait to blow out the candles. They'd just eat the whole cake at once, Caio added. The 4 of them laughed together. The party was simple, but it was full of meaning, of silences that no longer hurt, of life in the making. And even though still under construction, that little life was already strong enough to fill a room with affection. Ricardo spent the afternoon taking photos on his phone. He captured everything, Caio's surprised face opening a gift, Lucas's laughter bursting a balloon the moment the boys sang happy birthday to each other before any adult did. When the cake was cut, Lorena placed 2 slices on plates and sat next to Ricardo on the couch. "They're happy," she said, as if she still couldn't believe what she was seeing. "They're safe," he gently corrected. "That is even more important." She looked at him, not searching for answers, but confirming what she already knew. "You never had this before. You didn't even know you needed it." The afternoon sun streamed through the window, bathing the living room floor in golden light. And in that moment, right there, between promised pancakes and children's laughter, Ricardo discovered that home wasn't a place. It was a feeling, and he was finally inside it. Lorena picked up her phone. "Stay close like that. I want to take a picture," she said with a soft smile, looking at the 3 in front of her. Ricardo sat between the boys. Lucas wrapped his arms around his father's neck lovingly. Caio gripped his hand tightly, like he didn't want to let go, and then he smiled wide. "Daddy," he said with a small, confident voice, as if that word had finally found its place. Ricardo smiled too, one of those calm smiles from someone who knows they're right where they're meant to be. Lorena clicked and stayed there, still looking at the image on the screen. 3 genuine smiles, 3 intertwined lives, a whole family. And suddenly, something inside her expanded. She didn't cry, but her heart tightened, not from pain, but from something she had almost forgotten. A good emotion. That part of her chest that once held resentment now held something else. Peace. Acceptance. Later, with the boys already asleep, she sat next to Ricardo on the couch. The TV was on, but muted. The sound of the street drifted softly through the window crack, mixed with the night breeze. "I spent years wanting justice," she said slowly, her voice low. "But now I realize my justice didn't come from punishment. It came from what I built with my own hands." Ricardo said nothing. He just listened, with respect, with attention. "When you left me, I was just a scared woman, pregnant, alone. Today, I'm a mother, an entrepreneur. I have a voice. And the most beautiful part is knowing that this strength didn't come from anger. It came from the love that was left, the love that endured." She turned to face him. "Life changed me. It taught me that forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's freedom. And sometimes the ruins are the most fertile ground to rebuild." He reached out his hand. He didn't promise anything. He didn't say a word. But she understood and accepted the gesture. She touched his hand not like making a pact, but like someone who knows that to move forward, no label is needed, just presence. The next morning, Lorena printed that photo. She chose a nice frame and hung it on her bedroom wall. She placed it next to an old picture, one where she held the boys as babies in the chaos of a lonely, fresh start. Now, everything was part of the same story. There was no more before and after. It was all one continuous path, a line that, despite the detours, had never stopped moving forward. On her private profile, where she rarely posted anything, Lorena shared the photo and wrote a caption that was soon reposted by a friend, and within hours spread widely. "Rebuilding isn't going back to the past. It's having the courage to create a present where everyone fits. This is the photo that reminds me that what once broke me now makes me stronger." Thousands of likes followed, hundreds of comments. People saying they cried, that they saw themselves in that image, that they dream of similar reunions. Some commented that it wasn't just about a couple, it was about something bigger, family dignity. Others said, "This is why it's worth believing in love, even when everything seems to be in ruins." And there, in that simple image, was a new beginning. 3 smiles, a beautiful silence surrounding them. The silence of someone who, finally, no longer needed to shout to be heard. Because they already were, because they already belonged, because in some brave and beautiful way, home had found its way back. Did you enjoy today's story? Then make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with your friends. See you in the next video.